Welcome to Womanhood the Podcast. Our aim is to start conversation by providing an insight into the lives of transgender women through their own unique perspectives and personal experiences. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hello, I'm Charlotte Stamborough, and today I am joined with a special guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
I'm Alexandra Van-Gelder, and what do you want to know about me?
So, how did you decide on the name?
I originally changed my name to Alex because Alex wasn't gendered, and it was when I was still kind of figuring everything out. And the number of trans people I know that have done that is ridiculous. Most trans people at some point will have the name Alex. So I did that, and then just as I figured things out, changed it to Alexandra because I didn't want to change it too much. But I changed my full name to Alexandra, but most of my friends just call me Ali now.
So, you were assigned male at birth. Do you remember the first time that you felt your spirit was different to the one that you were assigned to?
I don't remember this, but apparently when I was 4 years old, I was adamant I'm going to be a princess when I grow up, which, could still happen because everything ends, Megan. Yeah, it's kind of always been there. I can't tell you a point in my life where I had this sudden realization of, there's something there. It's just always been there. And I think with most trans people, it's probably a similar thing because it's just, you're always aware of your gender. Even when you're like 3 years old, you're told, you're a boy, you're a girl, who's a pretty girl? And you hear stuff like that all the time as a kid. And I remember hearing it, not pretty girl, sadly, but I remember hearing it and thinking, I don't know why. I can't put my finger on it, but that just feels wrong. And that was basically what happened with that one.
So at what age did you shift in starting to dress how you wanted to dress?
Started wearing eyeliner in college. And at the time I was like, yeah, some guys are doing this. It's not a weird thing. But then I was like, I really like wearing eyeliner and I don't know why. And then from then to probably been about 21, it just kind of progressed continuously, getting more and more feminine. And then at 21 I was like, I'm not a boy. That makes sense now. And then it just kind of progressed that way and just kind of carried on from there.
So what was it like emotionally coming to terms with your identity?
I'm quite fortunate in that before I realised I was trans, I actually had loads of trans friends anyway. I don't really have any cis straight friends that I'm quite close with, but I've always been like that. Not intentionally, it just kind of happens. So because of that, when I realised, my first thought was, oh God, this is going to be a pain to do. This is going to be so much effort and this is going to be really, really hard. But it was more thinking about how hard it was going to be as opposed to, oh no, I'm trans. It was kind of a relief to finally go, okay, that's what it is. That's why my mental health is a bit hellish. And this might make it better. And it did, which is good.
So you've touched a bit on mental health. Did the discovery of your womanhood coincide with any body dysmorphia?
The body dysmorphia is always there, like always. But generally the word we use is gender dysphoria because it's not a case of you don't like the shape of your body. It's a case of it's the wrong body. It's just wrong. And I always remember being really, really young, like maybe 12 years old. And I can remember looking in the mirror and thinking to myself, something's wrong with me. I don't know what it is, but there's something wrong. And I was adamant at the time that there was something wrong. But I never said anything to anyone because they'll just tell me, you're just a typical teenager who doesn't like the way you look. It's a phase you go through, which it is. And don't get me wrong, I'm not demeaning that. It's not pleasant to go through and everyone does go through some version of that. But with me, it was a case of, it was like looking at somebody else. Like when you look in the mirror, it's literally like seeing somebody else's reflection. Nowadays, it's not too bad. And I think it is because I do tend to pass most of the time with most people. Like when people find out I'm trans, they tend to be quite surprised. Normally because I have a full face of makeup on and I'm quite good at that. I'm quite good at that now. Gender dysphoria is always there. Even I've spoken to quite a lot of people who've fully transitioned or their version of fully transitioning. And they've said they don't plan on taking any more steps, but they still have it. And it's not all trans people do, but I would say a very good number, probably more than half, still always have it. It never really goes away.
So at what point in your life did you talk to your family about how you were feeling?
I sent my parents a text explaining it. They understood absolutely nothing. In fact, they didn't even know what I was talking about. They needed to come to Sheffield to come and speak to me in person to find out because they just didn't understand. It wasn't a case of we don't understand where this is coming from. It was like, we don't know what you mean. We're very confused. What are you trying to tell us? Because we don't get it. And they were actually pretty good in terms of the acceptance stuff of it. Mum was just brilliant. She still is. dad tries very hard, but he struggles because he gets my name wrong quite a lot. He still calls me mate when I pick up the phone. Just like little things that he doesn't do to my sisters. And you can't call him out on it because it's like, oh, I say mate to girls all the time, and because some people do and they can use that defence, but the reality is no, you don't speak to any of my sisters like that. It's just me. He still gets my pronouns wrong most of the time, and I just sit correcting him constantly, and I can see his face getting more and more annoyed as it's happening. But he knows I won't stop doing it, so there's no point saying something to me about it. I got my parents a book about trans healthcare, which Mum read, which was quite good because it meant that she understood what was going on, what I was doing. My brother was absolutely thrilled because he was like, I'm the only boy in the family now. I was like, good for you. But he does ask me a lot of questions about what's going on with my genitals and my boobs and just everything. And I'm like, you're my brother, I can talk to you about it, but this is a little bit weird. But yeah, my family in general were pretty okay with it, but I think they were more okay with it because they know I'm the kind of person that if someone didn't accept me, regardless of who they were or how close to them, I would not hesitate to just walk away because I'm. They say you can't choose your family. Well, you can. You just walk away from them and it's done. If you've made your choice, you can choose your family. Not that I'm encouraging people to abandon the whole families or anything, but that's the kind of thing I would do, and I wouldn't think twice. I wouldn't regret it. It would just be you accept me or I go. But because I have that kind of personality, people tend to keep their mouth shut if they don't like it around me.
So in terms of dating, are you currently dating? What's dating been like since your transition?
I'm currently dating. Really fun story about that. Me and Will met on an app and had a first date. It was great. The next day I was like, I'm going to a house party. Do you want to come? And they said they can't because they're going to a house party as well. It was the same house party. Turns out we already had mutual friends in Manchester despite I'd only been here a month. And then the people I'd met in that month happened to be friends with Will. So we went to the house party, and while I was there, I was like, oh, this is my friend Ollie. Ollie went to the same college as me in Scunthorpe. And Will was like, oh, I went to a college in Scunthorpe. Which one? I was like, John Leggett. And I was like, oh, I went to John Leggett as well. What year? 2012 to 2014. Right, same. We were in the same year in the same college. This is weird. And somehow, through all of that, we never met. But we swapped genders, moved to the other side of the country, and then meet on an online dating app. So we had all these like little weird connections and somehow never met. And then that happens and we do. Before I met Will, it was just hell. It was awful because there's so much stigma around trans women that straight guys generally were interested until they found out you're trans. Gay guys are obviously not interested anymore because I don't present as male anymore. So you're left with this tiny little minority of people, and it basically ends up with, if you're a trans woman and dating, you just hope to find someone who's pansexual, basically. Because if they're pan, they don't care about your gender or genitals. So it got very, very hard. Dating. Very, very hard. Because I also used to sleep with quite a lot of people, like before I transitioned. And after I transitioned, it basically just stopped, not from lack of me trying, but just because people just weren't interested in trans people anymore.
What's the biggest achievement in your life, would you say, so far?
I mean, I'm currently doing my 4th degree, so I'd say getting 3 degrees was quite impressive. I'm quite fortunate that through my life I've just been quite lucky with opportunities that have always come. Like my degrees, I've always managed to find funding for things. Like I still haven't had to pay for one yet. There's quite a lot I'm proud of. I think it's just because I do work damn hard. Like at the minute, my average week is about 100 hours.
So you said was it 4 courses that you said you've done, 4 degrees at uni?
I'm currently doing my 4th degree.
Did you receive any funding for your gender identity or?
So you're talking about the hardship fund, aren't you?
Anything.
So the hardship fund at Sheffield Hallam is a fund you can apply for if you fit into a few categories. It was actually me that had transgender added as that category. Well, me and 2 other people, we put a lot of pressure on the uni to do that. So yeah, I applied for the hardship fund during my final year of my undergrad because my mental health got so bad. I basically had 4 months where I couldn't work. And it was that or bankruptcy, basically, because the overdraft was completely used and gone. There was no money coming in, and it was that or I'm screwed, basically. So yeah, the funding for the university was there. Unfortunately, it's not available to postgrads, which I'll be sorting out soon, don't worry.
So you said that you put pressure on the uni, obviously, to do that. Why is that important, that people receive that money?
For transgender people, every single aspect of your life is harder. And my brother actually was saying to me last night, So my brother's quite opinionated, shall we say. He doesn't get how hard it is for trans people. Like, if I asked you to name 3 aspects of your life, what would you say?
Work,
Yep.
family, friends.
Okay, you're going to lose friends when you transition. The friends that you don't lose, are probably not all of them are going to understand it. They're going to ask you lots of awkward questions. That means that spending time with your friends is now going to be a chore. With your family, I'm yet to meet a trans person who hasn't lost any members of their family at all. So I know Will won't mind me saying this, but when Will came out, their mum told everyone that her daughter had died. And Will hasn't seen their mum in a few years because of that. And all of their mum's friends think that Will is dead, basically. And what was the one he said?
Friends, family, work.
Work. I know so many people who've lost their jobs, and it's been to do with them being trans, because there's all this legislation in place that's meant to protect us. When I hear the words diversity hire, I just want to cry. Because I'm like, oh, you shouldn't be hired because you're trans. I'm like, no, you're absolutely right. But if you've got a business of 1,000 people and not one of them is trans, there is something wrong with your business, because more than 1 in 1,000 people are trans. It's just, yeah, it's the quota. I don't really agree with the quota, because I don't think you should hire someone just because they're trans. But you should be able to find someone easily who is trans and can do the job. But that isn't the way it works. They just see it as, oh, we've just got to hit this quota, so we've just got to give someone a job who's not qualified. And I'm like, if you're not attracting trans people who are qualified for the job, there's something wrong with you, not us. That's because something about you is dissuading us from applying there. Obviously, for me, it's a bit different because I work as a teacher. And yeah, I lose business over it. 100%, I do. I do lose business over it. I'd say about 1 in 3 of my clients meet me for the first time and don't want to continue with sessions. And some people might say, well, maybe that's just because of the way you teach. Before I transitioned, that hadn't happened once. Not at all. Because to put it bluntly, I'm very, very good at my job. Over the last 5 years, the lowest grade I've had was 1 student who got a C. And I've had at least 10 students every year. And 1 C in 5 years. To put it bluntly, I am very good at my job. I know what I'm doing. But ever since I transitioned, all of a sudden, that doesn't happen. Mansplaining is a thing, and the difference between how people treat men and women. When you actually go from one side of it to the other, the difference is scary. And I think if women actually knew how different it was, like cis women knew, because I don't think you do, because if you live as a cis woman, it's all you've ever known, it's all you ever will know. You don't know what it's like for the side. You hear about it, you might see things every now and again. But I think if cis women knew, there'd be riots in the street. It would be like anarchy. The whole place would just go mad. Like proper riots, people would die if they knew. I think it really is that big. So for me, at least, it was losing that male privilege and gaining womanhood and seeing the side. And I find, for me at least, at the minute, that's still the hardest thing for me. So you obviously know about the coronavirus stuff. I did a year in research once I finished my undergraduate, and I'm a micromolecular biologist, which means I knew everything about viruses and bacteria, having made a few myself. Like, I know everything about them. And when I was sat in a room a few days ago and people were talking about coronavirus, and I chipped in. And 3 people in the room start telling me I'm wrong, and I'm just sat there like, I'm literally a microbiologist. Like, this is what I specialised in. Why are you arguing with me? And it sounds ridiculous, and I have no doubt if people were to hear this, they would say, well, maybe they just disagreed with you. And I'm like, yeah, sure. But before I transitioned, that didn't happen. People did not disagree with me to the point that they do now. And don't get me wrong, I don't want to repress opinion, but it's just interesting that as soon as I've started being perceived to be a woman, everybody wants to argue with me about everything and my opinion. It's like all of a sudden I'm being treated like I'm stupid.
So whereabouts are you in your transition?
So everyone's transition is different, and only about 1 in 3 people trans people actually want surgery, for example. With me, I've started hormones, which is interesting because, my God, the mood swings. Oh, Christ, it's awful. And the cluster headaches. Like, I've got one now. I didn't realise women had to put up with this much shit. It really is awful. So the hormones I'm on, and my estrogen levels are now within a normal female range. So as long as that stays the same, the medication will be continuing. That's the patches. That's what they come as, and that's what they look like when they're on. They look really disgusting, and they leave your skin covered in marks, because you can't scrub it off, the marks they leave around. You can scrub and scrub and scrub, and you'll take your skin off before you get those black marks off. Because the black marks is like clustered up dead skin cells combined with the glue that's in the patch, and they stick real well. Some people you have to use like oil twice a week to rub on them to get them off. They're a pain to get off. So I've had that done. I've had hormones. I won't be having surgery because, to put it bluntly, my dysphoria comes from how I'm perceived. So if people perceive me as a man, that's what upsets me. As long as people don't do that, I'm not particularly fussed, and I don't really associate being female with, or being a woman with, having a vagina. So I won't have lower surgery. I would like facial feminization surgery, but it isn't available in the NHS except in exceptional circumstances, which I've already looked into and I know I won't be able to meet. I haven't got a GRC yet, which is a gender recognition certificate, because, well, it's a pile of shit. One of my friends who has transitioned in every way possible, had surgery, been on hormones for years, she's had the name she's had now as long as I've known her, and I've known her for 10 years, so she's been on hormones at least that long. Like me, she's also on an injection which blocks testosterone. And she got rejected because when you want to change your gender marker on your birth certificate, you have to apply to a gender recognition certificate panel, and they review you. And she was told she wasn't feminine enough because she dresses like a tomboy. And don't get me wrong, she is a tomboy, like hands down. She's a woman, but she's a tomboy. Like, she doesn't do frilly dresses and lots of makeup. She's very much a tomboy, but she's a girl. And because of that, they rejected her 3 times. So that's why I'm not bothering with it, because I'm just kind of like, I've already changed my passport. Every other documentation I have is changed. And if someone ever asks me for ID or needs some kind of proof about who I am, I can show them anything but my birth certificate. That's still all right for me. Obviously, that's a big limit for a lot of people, because a lot of people might not be able to afford, for example, passports or driving license. So, you know, there is a class barrier there, in that you do have to be earning money. Like, the transitioning is not easy, nor is it free. It's not too expensive, but that's just too expensive for me. For a lot of people, it is too expensive. And I have come across trans people before who have not done it because they couldn't afford it. But yeah, that's why I've not bothered with the gender recognition certificate. In all honesty, I'm still waiting for the hormones to fully work. Like, right now, my boobs are killing me. And I can't wear a bra because the pressure of a bra on them even hurts too much to bear. But that's just because they're growing quite quickly, which is nice. I've worked it out. I'm going up like a cup size every 2.5 months, which is nice.
So how has your mental health been within this process, if you can call it that?
Better in some aspects and worse in others. The effect that hormones have truly is astounding. I wasn't expecting it to be like it is. But before hormones, I basically had no empathy for anybody at all. Like, I would do the right thing, I'd help people I could, but that was because I wanted to, not because I could actually felt empathy. Whereas now, it's like I can't switch it off. I cried the other day at a cat video, and that's just because my emotions are just a bit all over the place. And obviously that has a knock-on effect with mental health. My mental health stuff is separate, for me at least, is separate to my trans stuff. Because I've reached a point where I don't feel like my transition or me being trans affects my mental health anymore. But my mental health is still rocky. So about once a year, I'll go through a rough phase, which I'm actually just coming out of. It's been this year, it's been last week. Although last year I didn't actually have one, so that's good. But my mental health tends to deteriorate at certain points in the year. Why, I'm not sure. I think it's probably because I'm clinically depressed. That's probably the reason. We'll go with that. I don't feel like it's related to my trans stuff, but I think I'm just very fortunate, and I'm very, very aware that I am very, very, very privileged that I don't have mental health stuff related to being trans anymore. I used to, but once I started transitioning and started passing as a woman, it just kind of evaporated, really.
So, going on to ignorance, how do you feel if you get misgendered?
The best way I can tell you what it's like as a cis person to know what that feels like, because it's hard to put into words. If you say to someone, can you imagine what it's like being trans? So in your case, for example, I would imagine you tried to imagine what it would be like if you wanted to be a boy, right? Rather than doing that, imagine everybody thinks you're a boy. Everywhere you go, you are you, but everywhere you go, people think that you're a boy. And just imagine what that feels like. That's what it's like. That's exactly what it feels like. It's like in your case, everywhere you go, sir, sorry, sir. Excuse me, sir. That's what it would feel like. And it's constant. Or it used to be for me. For some people it still is. For some trans people, unfortunately, it probably always will be that way. But yeah, the best way to do it is if you're a cis person, don't try and think, oh, what would it feel like if I wanted to be a boy, if you're assigned female and you identify as female. Think about what it would be like if everybody else thought that's what you were. And then you're starting to think about what it might feel like. But I promise you can't imagine how it actually feels. It's truly awful. I don't think there are words to put it into place. It's just awful.
So would you say that there's judgment within the LGBTQ plus community?
I can't answer that question without pissing a lot of people off. Gay men. It's always gay men. They seem to think that because we both have dicks, they can say whatever the hell they want and ask us all the questions they want to. Don't get me wrong, hashtag not all gay men. And it definitely isn't. Like, some of my best friends are gay men. Oh God, I sound like a straight person and cis person being an ally. Like, no, some of my friends are gay men. But no, like, basically, when I go on nights out, I only really go out to the gay village in Manchester because I live so close to it and it's safer for me there. But I once, like, this wasn't even that long ago, I had a gay man tell me that I'm just an attention-seeking faggot, was the exact word he used. Because although LGBT is lumped together, and yes, I would say most people in the LGBTQ community are accepting of trans people, but there's a very big and very vocal group of gay and lesbian people that aren't. You saw it at London Pride a couple of years ago. It was at Manchester Pride a few weeks ago, last year now actually, just over a year in Manchester. We had TERFs in the village putting signs up everywhere, all over the village, about anti-trans stuff. Admittedly, the village's response was incredible. And you can still find the posters that were produced up in the village in some places, but every single bar on this, like the whole of Canal Street had signs up saying TERFs not welcome here, and like trans people are our family, and just really nice stuff. It was lovely. So don't get me wrong, it's definitely not the majority. It's nowhere near the majority. It's a very small minority of gay and lesbian people, but they're very, very loud. They're very vocal, and they're very easy to find online if you were to try and search for them. And then obviously you've got Mumsnet, which is another black hole of shit.
So, talking of TERFs, how do you yourself deal with ignorance?
My method of arguing with people is to make them look stupid. Because if you make somebody look stupid, they tend to shut up. My view is, I used to be the kind of person who'd be like, oh, well, you know, I want to educate everybody. And as I've aged, I've slowly realised, no, some people cannot be educated and they will always be arseholes. And so my go-to now is, right, okay, I'm going to make you look like the idiot that you are. So my way of doing it is hitting them with questions that I know they won't be able to answer, by making them awkward that the only way they could answer the question is by contradicting themselves. So rather than telling them that they're wrong, ask them a question which, when they answer, will show them that they are wrong themselves.
So for our listeners, can you walk us through any questions that might be inappropriate to pose to a trans person? That is a very broad question.
How much time do you have? Okay, rather than listing off all the questions, I'll just say this instead. If you don't need to know, and I don't mean curiosity, I don't mean you want to know, I mean if you don't need to know, don't ask. It's none of your business. The main one that everybody wants to ask, and I have no doubt if you've interviewed other trans people, they've said, so, what genitals do you have? I'm like, right, let's say hypothetically speaking, you're a cis person, and someone comes up to you and says, so tell me about your genitals. How big's your labia, right? You're going to be freaking the hell out, are you not? Why do you think that's any different for us? That's freaky. We don't want to tell you about our genitals. That's messed up. Like, go away, you pervert. That's weird. That's the big one. My favourite, moment was at my grandmother, this is kind of dark, at my grandmother's funeral. My mum's friends came up to me and was like, so, when are you going to be a girl? And I'm like, when are you going to be a man? And she was like, oh, come on, you know what I mean? I was like, no, I don't. Tell me what you mean. So, oh, when are you having the op? Oh, which one? And then basically at this point I was just trying to annoy her because I just cremated my grandmother and she was pissing me off. And she ended up saying to me so you know, when are you having the operation to change your penis into a vagina? And I said, are you asking me about my genitals? And she went, well, yeah, you know, I'm curious. I went, oh, right, okay. How big's your clitoris? And she's like a woman and who's like 55, 60 years old, really close family friend. And I'm asking her how big a clitoris is, and you could see the look of shock on her face, and she was like, that's a bit inappropriate. I was like, right, and so is asking me about my genitals. It's weird. Don't do it. That's the big one. But, like, when are you having the operation? When's the op? Do they keep it in a jar? Oh God, I get students asking that all the time. Do they keep it in a jar? Because I'm quite open about the fact I'm trans, and like when I go into schools, because I'm kind of like, if you are never exposed to trans people, you're going to think it's weird. So if they ask me, I'll say, yeah, I'm trans. And then I'll follow it with, but right now I'm teaching you science, so if you want to ask about this, ask me at the end. Because, you know, you've got to remain professional, and I don't go into schools to preach trans stuff, but if they ask me, I'll answer it and then say, right, ask me at the end because we need to get you through your work. But yeah, just if you don't need to know, don't ask. And if you're asking because you want to be educated and understand trans issues, then say to a trans person, like, look, I'm trying to get my head around some trans stuff. I have some questions. Would it be all right if I asked you them? And then don't be offended when most of them say no, because we get asked it on a daily basis. I don't mind talking about it. I'm quite open. But like right now, I'm being interviewed for a dissertation. Yeah, I have 3 more consent forms in that pile just there for other people's dissertations. We get asked a lot, constantly. And that's just people doing dissertations. You can imagine what it's like. That's just people in uni. You can imagine what it's like when the rest of the world knows you're trans and wants to ask you questions. But yeah, generally speaking, if you don't need to know, don't ask. And if you're asking because you're educating yourself, try Google first. After that, then yeah, try and ask trans people about their experiences, because it is the best way to learn. But don't be offended if they say no. Just be aware it's absolutely exhausting, and you can only sit and talk about it for so long before it starts to just be painful, to be honest.
So in terms of education, is there any organisations or resources that you'd sort of point people in the direction of? In
Manchester, I would recommend the LGBT Foundation. They're amazing. I also volunteer there. In Leeds, Trans Leeds, Mermaids is quite good if you're a child. In Sheffield, probably Say It is the best one to go to. But it depends about in the country you are. A quick Google online, you'll find loads of stuff. Absolutely loads. Like if you're looking for specific resources for like help with transitioning or advice and stuff, go on Google, just type in trans support in the name of where you live, you will find something, because the list of supports out there is exhaustive.
So do you have any advice for anyone who may be listening who's questioning their gender identity?
You'll figure it out. It's hard. It's very, 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 very hard. You'll probably be terrified. There'll also be a very large part of you that doesn't want to be that trans person. Like I don't know any trans people that wanted to be trans. Most of us were kind of like, oh shit, I'm that person now. First of all, if you do feel like that, I'm sorry. It's not a nice feeling. You will get over it. And secondly, give yourself time. You'll figure it out. If you are young, in that you haven't really finished going through puberty yet, you can buy yourself some time. There are medications you can go on which will not cause you to transition, but they will delay your own puberty, which are blockers. So if that's what you want to do, or you want to gain some time, then yeah, go and talk to your GP about it. So do your research beforehand about what the NHS recommends for transgender teenagers, transgender children and transgender adults. And if I was you, I would suggest taking the information in with you just in case your doctor is a clueless idiot, because it does happen quite a lot where you get doctors that just don't know what to do. At my last doctor's appointment, I had to explain to him what to do to get my estrogen levels up because he didn't know. So yeah, you will find a lot of doctors out there a bit clueless, especially if you live in very small towns or quite rural areas where there aren't as many people, because there's a good chance the doctor you meet might not have really met any trans people in practice before. So it could be fresh water for them. The other thing I'll add to that is, don't be angry at the doctor if they don't know what to do with you. It isn't their fault. And it's not their fault because when doctors are trained, this is not something that's covered very well at all. They don't choose their training. It's not their fault. And they very well may say to you, look, please make another appointment. I need to do some research and come back. They're not trying to pile you off. And I know it's painful and I know you're going to be waiting years, so more time is not helpful. But it's not their fault, and they're far more likely to help you if you're understanding of that. And they're also probably going to do better if you can direct them to the point within the NHS where the information is that they need.
Thank you for coming on the podcast and sharing your unique perspectives and experiences, Alex. And thank you all for tuning in. We have been Womanhood the Podcast, and I have been your host. Find us on Twitter for more at WomanhoodCast, and me, your host, at C. Stamberjourno. Goodbye for now.